Welcome, welcome, welcome to today's webinar, and thank you for joining. We're very excited to share this exciting presentation with you today. I'm Nisha Bakshi, and I'm on the developer marketing team here at Salesforce. Today, we're joined by Kevin Foreman. Kevin has been working on the Salesforce Lightning platform for a decade. The Salesforce community has even recognized Kevin as a Force.com MVP and authored ngForce, Custom-Related List, and Promise libraries, all available on GitHub. You can also check him out on his blog at codefryer.com. In 2015, Kevin joined Salesforce as a customer success architect with Marketing Cloud. And in 2016, Packet published his book, Mastering Application Development with Force.com. Kevin's area of expertise is around mobile development, Apex, programming work, asynchronous, and continuous integration. And with that, go to the next slide. And before we begin, just a quick note that when considering future developments, whether by us or by any other solution provider, you should always base your purchasing decisions based on products and features that are currently available. And I'll hand it over to Kevin.
Good morning, good afternoon, and good evening from all over the world. My name is Kevin Foreman, and we're going to talk about doing iOS development with the Salesforce Mobile SDK. To do that, we're going to talk a little bit about when and why you would want to use the SDK. And we're going to go into some details there, some specific pillars of success for using the SDK. We're going to talk about what the SDK can help you do. We're going to go through a demo app called Trail Insurance. You're going to see some features of the SDK and how it works with Swift on iOS. And then finally, here at the end, we'll have some time for Q&A. Again, if you have questions, feel free to ask them in the chat window, in the question window of GoToWebinar, and we'll get to those here at the end. So with that, let's dive into things. So when and why would you want to use the mobile SDK for iOS? There are three big pillars of success here, and the first one is the largest. Your team has or wants to gain experience with building iOS apps. If you don't have experience building iOS apps and you don't want to learn and gain that experience building iOS apps, we've got another solution for you we'll talk about in just a second. The second pillar is your use case necessitates a customized app experience. Now, what do I mean by that? Well, I mean, you want to do some custom UI, perhaps you want to make it more like a game or augmented reality included, if you want to use custom branding or imagery, and if you want to use specific sensors and features of iOS and the iOS platform. And the third one is just like it. You want to use those iOS platform features like on-device machine learning, geofencing, you want to use the camera for various applications, or you want to use some of the audio features of the device. If you meet those three criteria, then the mobile SDK is a great resource for you to build that custom experience and to build that custom app for your users. Now, oftentimes that means you're going to be writing an app not for your employees of your company, but for your end users who are using a service or buying a product or interacting with your company in some other way, oftentimes a B2C type situation or a business to consumer type situation. Now, to make it short and succinct, if your team wants to build powerful, intelligent native iOS apps that integrate on-device features, then you should use the SDK. Otherwise, if you're trying to put together a quick and simple, CRUD application where you're accepting, input of records, you're viewing records, I want to point you at our at the App Store to look for our Salesforce mobile app, because you can do a lot with our declarative tools on the platform without having to write a line of code. Now, it's easier than ever before to write iOS apps with Swift and the Salesforce SDK, but sometimes you may not need that. Okay, so if you don't hit those three pillars of success, or if you want to do something very simple or perhaps just for a very small team, look at building an application in the Salesforce app that we provide you. You can get that on the iOS App Store. All right, now let's look at what can it do. Now, the Salesforce iOS SDK provides a lot of features, and I'm not going to touch on all of them. I'm just going to touch on some of the highlights, but perhaps the most basic but most important feature is that it's going to securely connect your mobile app that you're writing to your Salesforce org data and processes. So what do I mean by that? You have the ability to go and grab data out of Salesforce and display it in your app, or take data from inside your app and put it into Salesforce. Now, if you're putting data into Salesforce, all of your automated processes still apply. So if you've got workflow rules, if you have process builder processes, if you have triggers in place, approval processes, anytime that those would come into play during a UI experience through a web browser, your app can trigger those same things by saving or creating, updating records. Now, a lot of the power of the SDK comes in marrying your Salesforce org and processes to on-device sensors and functionality. So I grouped these two things together, and one of the things that it allows you to do is it's going to help you take and deal with sensor data. So in this case, I'm using the example of a Latin long, a GPS coordinate, and we're going to take that and we're going to put that into our Salesforce app, and we're going to be able to view it inside Salesforce, Salesforce's web UI, and we'll also be able to do things with that coordinate information, like put it on a map. So that is a quick, simple version of what I mean by sensors, but it's not limited to GPS. You can also do things like the camera. Perhaps you want to be able to scan QR codes and submit a case that has the QR code of the serial number of the product, so that you can tie the case that a user is submitting back to a particular product. Or perhaps you want to take pictures, and we'll see an example of this here in a little bit, to take pictures of things and attach those to the case. In our situation with our demo, we're going to take pictures of car damage. Now, all those photos, all that sensor data, all that goes into your Salesforce org, and it then becomes data that you can automate processes around, and you can also give to your, say, claims adjusters or your service cloud users to make decisions on. Now, it can do more than that too. It's going to really facilitate business to consumer applications. So if you've ever built something with the Salesforce community for the web interface, you can turn around and use community users, community licenses, and community features inside your B2C app written in Swift with the iOS SDK. And along with that, because this is an iOS app, you're going to get all the standard iOS features, things like nearly real-time notifications via the Apple push notification service. So if you've got a situation where your Service Cloud workers are working on a case, or you've got a community interaction conversation going on, you can notify your users through the push notification service, hey, your case has been adjusted, or someone has commented on your thread. Very powerful for community engagement. Now, some other more advanced things that it can do is it can help you surface data from your Salesforce org when the device is offline. We're not going to go into this in the demo today, but you have the ability to surface and sync data so that it's available to your devices even when they're offline. Now, this is a really powerful use case for people who are, say, service workers who are working on equipment where there may not be cellular service. One example I heard was that people were using this to surface maintenance records for people who are on the tops of windmills, wind generation windmills. So 300 feet up in the air, they're trying to pull up the information of when this was last maintained, and they've got that because it's offline, even though they're in the middle of the field, way out of cellular service. And perhaps the most exciting one for me, the exciting feature here is we have the ability to dynamically define your iOS data views with your org metadata. So let me unpack that a little bit. What I mean is that your org metadata, in this case, the compact layout that you see on the left, can define what data is shown inside the app. So that if you go into your org and you change that metadata, say you take out a type field, then the type field, on reload, will no longer appear inside your iOS app. This means that you can change what data is viewed by your users without issuing a new version of the app to your users. Very powerful stuff. All right, so let's look at an example of this. We're gonna look at Trail Insurance. I like to refer to it as my happy little demo app. This is a B2C car insurance app. So if you drive, you're probably familiar with the joy of car insurance. And what we're gonna do is we're gonna mimic that. We're gonna mimic the ability for, in our demo, for people to file a claim saying, hey, I was rear-ended, or I ran over the post office box, etc. We're going to help those users who filed those claims view what claim information is available, see their status, etc. And to do that, we're going to use several on-device features These features that are things that are only available to you when you're writing a custom app. So those 3 pillars of success we talked about, where we have the experience, check. We've got a custom UI we're building to make this simple and easy for our users. Check, you'll see that here in just a second. And finally, we're using on-device features, things like the camera, GPS, and maps. We're going to be using voice-to-text technology, and we're going to be using our contacts that are already on the device. All this is going to go into our Salesforce org, and we'll be able to see that here in a little bit as well. So with that, let's dig into the sample app. Now, over here on the right, you see my iPhone, and I'm going to open up the Trail Insurance app. And when we open it up, we immediately see the open claims list. Now, this is pulled dynamically from Salesforce, and if I click into this list here, it's going to pull that information from Salesforce. And here's my information. My case origin is the Trail Insurance mobile app. It's a car insurance type. We've got a priority status, an incident location, and a subject. Not a whole lot of information here, but we'll be able to see how we can change that here in just a few minutes. But let's look at what it looks like when we want to actually create a case, because that's where things get really interesting. So when we click the New Claim button, we see a bunch of things here on the screen. The first one is this map display with a little car in the center. And this is set up as a scrolling map display. So if I move this around and say, put the car there, you'll see that it shows me an address. And if I move it again, it'll show me a different address. And this is using a reverse geolocation feature and the map kit, such that when I recenter the map, when I move the map around, when it's done moving, it sends the current center of the map location to a reverse geolocation service. It's part of the iDevice. It's part of iPhones and iPads. And when you use that, you're going to get a text version string back of where you are. So we're using the map not only to show a graphic image of where the incident occurred, but also to grab the address. So when you take and push that information into Salesforce, the user on the other end, the Salesforce user, is going to see an image of where the incident occurred and have an address for where it occurred as well. And that's really powerful because we have data quality ensured in that. We're not asking the user where it happened. They're not going to say, well, somewhere along mile 30 on I-70. No, this is going to give you an address as close as can be, and it's all based on the phone's GPS. So let's look at what we can do in the next little segment down. We've got a description down here. Now, I want to record a description. I don't know about you. I've only been in a couple of accidents in my life, and I hope not to have any more. But when I'm right after an accident, I tend to be a little shooken up, and typing is probably not the best form of input. So I've got this set up so that we can record using voice to text and then upload not only the audio file of what's happening, but also the text of what's going on. So let's record this. Hello, I was rear-ended on Midnight Pass by a brown SUV that drove away. We'll hit OK, give it permission. And we can see here that it's making a text version of what I wrote, complete with all my grammatical errors. Okay, now that's pretty cool. Let's take a photo of the damage of our car. Now, as you might imagine, I'm not actually in my garage where my car is, so I'm going to take a picture of my keyboard, and I'll use that photo, and I'll add another one, take a picture of my screen. Great. So I've got a couple of photos of the accident damage that I want to upload, and then I'm going to click the parties who are involved. And in this case, I'm going to click a couple of friends. Turns out they were the ones who were in the car with me, and they can provide a statement. And then I'm going to click submit. Now, what's going on under the covers here is that this is taking this information and submitting it to Salesforce. Now you can see it's submitted all that information to Salesforce, and if we click on the incident on Wednesday, March 13th, you can see that all that information shows up there. Now, I want to see the description of what happened, so let's go into our Salesforce org and let's set that up, because this is an extremely powerful bit of technology. So I'm going to go into the object manager, and we're dealing with cases here. So I'm going to go to case, and I'm going to go to compact layouts. Now I chose to develop this with compact layouts, but you could use custom metadata or field sets, whatever you'd like, but we'll go in here and we'll click edit. And we've got the list of items that are going to show up here on the right. So if we look at this, you can see we've got case origin. No, that's right. Type, car insurance. Let's remove type. That we know it's going to be car insurance. And let's find the description field. Let's look at let's choose a different one. Let's go with contact name. And we'll also put in there the case reason and the account name. Put a few things in there. Let's save that. Now, if I go back to my iOS app and I refresh this by clicking on it again, we've got some more information that happened here. Our reason is the vehicle incident, and we've got our case number, our subject, and the contact ID of the contact that is my user on this. And so just by changing the metadata in our Salesforce org, we've changed the way what information our Salesforce, or excuse me, our iOS app is showing. So let's look a little bit about what that looks like in code. So there are
zoom in as well. We've got some feedback that it's still a little hard to read. So you can just zoom in a couple of times.
Sure.
Thanks.
How's that? Let's stop and do a tech check. Can everyone read the code?
That's better. Thank you.
Great. Okay, so I want to start us off on the ability to go and submit a new claim. Now, there's a lot happening here, but Swift and the SDK and iOS make this really easy. If we look at the code that we've got going on here, there's less than 200 lines of code in this file being responsible for the vast majority of uploading that claim. Oh, I'm sorry, just over 200 lines. Now, let's walk through this a little bit. Let me scroll up to the top. And what we've got going on is a series of individual transactions. And each of those transactions or calls to Salesforce build up and are part of the overall process of uploading a case or creating a case. So to do this, what we're going to do is we're going to use a Swift feature called closures. And if you've ever written iOS with, say, Objective-C, you may be familiar with the idea of completion blocks. And this is going to be very familiar to you. If you've never done anything like this before, I'm going to walk you through it. But a completion block is simply what happens or what is done when the bit of work that is asynchronous is completed. So you've got some work, you don't know how long it's going to take, you tell the device to go do it, and you say, hey, when you get done, run this block of code. And that's the completion block. And so what we do is we chain together these individual transactions with completion blocks. And to do that, let's look at the upload claim transaction. This method is this is what kicks everything off. We're going to take the information we've got, we're going to put a little, we're loading and submitting our claim modal view on the screen, and we're going to go through and then say when we've fetched our master account for user, because we're going to need the account ID for a lot of our work. So we're going to go grab this account ID, and when we get done, then we're going to run this create case method. Okay, so we've got a method that starts everything off and then calls some asynchronous work, that fetch master account for user method. And then when we're done, we're going to call create case. So let's take a look at what create case does below. Now, create case here is where we do the vast majority of the work in uploading the details of our case. But if you look at the code, you'll see that all we're really doing is creating a dictionary. It's a Swift dictionary with string keys and any type for the definition for the value. And if what we're going through here is we're just creating that dictionary of information to upload. So we're setting our origin to Trail Insurance mobile app. We're creating a status of new. We're setting the account ID to that account ID we grabbed up before. And we're going to take all that information and we're going to submit that with the create case method down here. Now this is a create case built into the SDK. And when we get done with doing that, we're going to call this create contacts method. Now the create contacts method is going to turn around and create a contact contact requests up into one composite request and send those off to Salesforce. And what you get back is a composite response saying success, success, success. Oh, this one's duplicate. Okay, or success, exactly how it works. And when we're done, we're going to done creating our contacts. We're going to create the case contacts. Now, in our situation, case contacts is a junction object between case and contact. Now, this is an interesting trade-off because community users, and we're using community users here, can't own contacts and can't own accounts. So we have to associate those contacts that we create with the case so that they're viewable by the user. So we're going to create this case contacts. And when we're done creating our case contacts, and again, case contacts is a composite request, we're going to finish doing that. We're going to upload the map image. Now, I talked to you about how we took the map and we wanted to upload an image of it so that our claims adjusters can see where the accident occurred. And this is how we're going to do it. We're going to take and snapshot, and this is one of those iOS features that's only available in custom built apps, is the snapshotter. And the snapshotter is going to allow us to take an image of the map itself and upload it as a PNG file to Salesforce. And when we've done doing that, we're going to upload our photos. Our photos are going to be uploaded in this one, and like you might imagine, when we're done with the photos, we'll upload the audio. And when we've finally uploaded the audio, we're going to say, okay, hey, we're done. Let's rewind back to our open claims view. So that's the basis of how the overall transaction works. Let's look at what that ends up doing inside Salesforce. So here's our Salesforce org. I'm going to go into the app launcher and click service. Now, I'm going to go into cases here, and I'm going to switch to all cases. Now, we look here in our iOS device on the right, and it says our case is 1027. So let's go into case 1027. And here's our incident location information. We've got the text of it. Let me get out of the edit view. We've got the text of it. We've also got the GPS coordinates of where it occurred. And we have our description. This is that voice to text transcription that happened, where I said that aloud and my iPhone transcribed that into text that got uploaded. But actually, let's look at what those uploads are. So let's look at related. And oh, here's our contacts. We've got our contacts that were uploaded there in our related list through our case contact junction object. And here we have 4 attachments that have occurred. So if we look at a first attachment here and let it load the preview, here we can see my desk that I took a picture of. That's pretty cool. But we can also look at the map. Here's the image of the map where it occurred with a pin where the accident occurred. And I can also, if I wanted to, I could listen to the M4A file, the audio file of what I transcribed. So that's what we see inside Salesforce. Let's scoot back over and let's look at the flip side of this. Let's look at what it looks like to view code, to view our information when we load it. And to do that, we're going to look at our data source for our application, or for our open claim view. So these are the ones that are already open. And we're going to call this a layout data source delegate. Why layout data source? Well, the layout data source comes from the way I use custom layouts to pull this information. But what we're doing is we've got a query here down at the bottom where we are making a call to grab the compact layout for our object, in this case, a case. Now, I'm passing in that I want the compact layout for a case. I've only got one compact layout identified. It's going to give me the active one in any case. So I'll get my active compact layout type, and I'm going to pull from that through decoding the JSON what fields are there. And once I've got those fields pulled out, I can then turn around and make a request for retrieve, which is an SDK method, giving a case as the object type, an object ID, which we know because we've clicked on the case, and then turn around and say, this is our field list that we're requesting. So out of that compact layout, I'm extracting the fields, and making a list of fields separated by a comma, and then saying, hey, give me these fields on the retrieve. That's what allows us to build our actual data source for a view, and this is what our open claims view is doing. It's very similar. Without looking at a specific claim, it's just going to look at the the actual list, and it's built on a query as well. So if you've ever done SOCL in Salesforce, you'll be familiar with this. We've got a request with the SOCL query, and we're going to set that SOCL query in our controller. So we can reuse this object list data source multiple times by using it with a different query. And in this case, here we're going to generate our object list data source with the query select ID, case number, etc. from the status, from case where the status is not closed, and we're going to order by the case number. Pretty quick, pretty simple, but very powerful. We've built this out so that users can create new claims and can view those claims, and we're doing the create with a bunch of built-in native-only SDK methods and sensor data, like the camera, like voice to text, GPS and maps, and the map snapshotter that lets us pull an image of the map when we're submitting the claim. So with that, let's go back here into our slide deck here, and where do you go from here? Well, we wanted you to make Trailhead the next step where you start to learn much more about this. There's all sorts of information in this great trail that Apple and Salesforce put together called Build World-Class iOS Apps with Salesforce Trail. And there's a link to it there. That'll be available after the webinar as well in the video recording. And it covers a number of things, but if you've never done Swift, you're gonna learn Swift essentials there. If you've never played with Xcode or worked with Xcode, this is where you can go and learn how to use Xcode. You're going to go through the Salesforce Mobile SDK Basics module. This is going to be, how do I set up a project? What can it do in greater depth? How do I authenticate? What kinds of work can I do to make this easier or reusable? All that information is in the SDK Basics. And then finally, we've got a module on native iOS development. So this is where you're going to see, how do I change the login URL for my authentication, etc. So with that, I want to thank everyone for coming today. It was great walking through and talking about the Salesforce Mobile SDK for iOS. And I think, Nisha, we've got a survey here at the end. Is that true? It's going to show up in GoToWebinar, is that correct?
Yep, yeah, we'd love to hear your feedback. So please make sure to fill out your survey at the end of the webinar.
Great. So with that, let's talk about Q&A. Do we have questions?
Yes, we do, Kevin. Can I customize the login screen?
You can. You can actually customize a lot about how the SDK presents that login screen, even presenting your own login screen to some extent. But you can change the color, the text, all that just inside the app. If you want to do some more detailed things, you can actually present your own login screen if you'd like. What you saw here in Trail Insurance, there was no login screen. I just fired it up and it immediately showed up. That's not because there isn't a login screen. This is a secure app. It is securely connected to our Salesforce data. It's just that I had already logged in. If you could see that, you would see that we've actually got it set up to log into a community. So when you see the community login, if you've ever seen that in the UI, you would see something very similar to it on the screen. But when you go in to change that, it's all in, let's look at the code here. I can show you the code. It's in the app delegate file. And this whole section here allows you to customize the color, text color, font size, navigation bar, all the information of your login screen. That's a great question.
How can I set the login authorization URL to my community?
Oh, that's another great question. So there are a couple ways you can do it. Let's look at it in a couple of ways. Let me show you the built-in SDK way. I'm going to uninstall the app from my device real quick and then run it from Xcode, so it'll force us to log in again. And I'll show you there are two ways you can do it. One is in code. So if you're shipping a app to customers, for your customers to use, you want to mark it down in code so that everyone views the same thing By the way, here's that login screen that you see that is communities based. But when you, just out of the box with the SDK, you've got this gear icon up at the top. If you click on that, you'll see that there are some pre-built connections here. That production, that sandbox, those are for production and sandbox, as you might imagine. But we also have this one here listed, sandbox velocity, business 2.8, etc. That is the one that I've coded into the app, and you notice it's the default. But how you code that in your app is actually pretty simple. In the SDK setup, you'll create this bootconfig.plist, and you already get the info.plist with the building when you create a new iOS app. So in the info.plist, there's a key called sfdcco auth login host. Let me see if I can make this bigger. No, well, let me make that one bigger. And this is where you're going to enter in your authorization URL. Now, the key to this is you can't, unintuitively here a little bit, you can't put https:// It just needs to be the domain. So in our case, we're setting that to be sandbox-velocity-business, so on and so forth. That's another great question.
Great. And Kevin, can you explain what Swift is?
Swift is an amazing new programming language. I say new. It's been around for a few years now. Apple has developed and then open sourced Swift. It is a compiled, statically typed or strongly typed language. A lot of people think of it only as iOS development, but it's not just iOS development. You can do Mac development, and you can do server-side development with it as well. It's an amazing programming language, probably one of my top 3 programming languages. It has strong support for making your life as a developer easier when you're doing asynchronous development of various types. So if you're talking with remote servers, if you're doing work that requires, some bit of work that you don't know how long it's going to take. So if you're doing anything asynchronous, that completion block syntax that we showed is really powerful for doing that. Makes your life a lot simpler. But Swift is a programming language. You can learn more about it at swiftlang.org, I believe.
Thanks, Kevin. Can I set app-specific pin protections?
You can. App-specific pin protections are based actually through your Salesforce org. So if we go in here and we look at our Salesforce org, the connection between your mobile app and your Salesforce org is through what's called a connected app. And if we go into setup, we can look at our connected app here. And there's a it's almost hidden in plain sight. But let's go and look at our app here. Let's look at our connected apps through App Manager. Now I very creatively named mine demo. So if we view this, we're going to get this consumer key, and that's our link between the mobile app and our Salesforce org that ties the authentication to a particular org. And then as we scroll down here, we've got this one little checkbox, implement screen locking and pin protection. And if you check that box, not only do you have to log in, but you have to set a pin. Now, by default, that's 4 characters, 4 numbers, or if you're using one of the newer devices with either Touch ID or Face ID, you also get the biometric protection. So by checking that box and launching your app, after rebuilding it and launching it, what you get is this thing that comes back and says, oh, you have to put in extra pin protection. What's your pin? Or can I use Face ID? And it'll pop up and say, hey, can I use Face ID? If you say yes, it'll authenticate you with your face, and you're on with using the app. Pin protection is a very powerful extra layer of protection, and the way it's implemented in the SDK means that there's virtually no work involved in turning it on. You literally just have to check that checkbox.
Great. Does an app written with the SDK have to be tied to a Salesforce instance, or can it be tied to different instances as needed?
Oh, that's a really good question. The answer is it doesn't have to be tied to a specific instance. It does have to be tied to a specific connected app. Now, that connected app can be shared across multiple instances so long as the connected app is set up. Now, what I mean by that is if you've got one connected app set up, you can go in and choose production or sandbox, or you can put in custom domains here. So for instance, if you were writing this app and you wanted to QA it or test it with a up and coming, not yet released customer community, you could go in here and create a new host, and you could say test community.salesforce.com, and we'll give it a test community name. Done. Now it's going to give me an error because it can't actually find that server. It's going to do some validation checking on what I type in. But if I were to have, given you an actual domain that worked, it would authenticate against that instead of the one that I coded in. So using that little gear icon, you can actually set that up in various ways so that you can do different Salesforce orgs through that. You can also just change the org regardless of the domain it's on. So if you've got two production orgs and you want to switch back and forth between them, all you have to do is hit the logout button and then re-log in using the other org credentials.
Please advise how to enable Einstein Voice. Is that feature only available with the SDK?
That's a great question, and to be honest with you, I haven't played a lot with Einstein Voice. It is only available to the SDK so far as I'm aware, but don't quote me on that one. I'd have to go back and do more research on it. Like I said, I haven't done much with Einstein Voice yet.
Cool. How do you handle logging into Salesforce? Does each mobile user need to have a Salesforce license to access the mobile app?
Oh, that's another great question. The answer is yes. So in our demo instance here with trail insurance, we've set it up so that it uses community users and community login license. So if you've ever done anything with a community, you're familiar with the way you create a community user. And once you've created that community user, they'll get the email, they can click to set their password, and then you can turn around and they can log in, but they can only log into the community, which is why I gave that custom URL here. So when they go into the app and they click here, you'll see it change to a community login. And if they type in their community username and password, they log in there. But the way the iOS SDK is set up, yes, you do need to authenticate with a user of your Salesforce org. That can be a standard user, say, a sales engineer or a the CEO of your company can log in that way. But the way this particular demo you saw was designed is that it's community users.
Kevin, is it possible to include Lightning components when developing with mobile SDK? If not, is it possible to do this with the other mobile SDK, for example, Hybrid?
So the Hybrid SDK is kind of out of scope for this webinar. There may be a future webinar on the Hybrid SDK, but to answer your particular question, there are several ways you could incorporate Lightning components and Lightning Web Components in your mobile app. Most of them do work through doing Lightning out and then surfacing a web view within your application. But if you want to do Lightning components and Lightning Web Components, I really want to point you at the Salesforce app or the My Salesforce app. The difference between the two is the My Salesforce app is customized and branded for your company, and you purchase that from Salesforce, and we give it to you as an app you can distribute on the App Store, versus the Salesforce app, which anyone can go grab on the App Store. It's branded with Salesforce colors and logos, but you can log into any org with it. Okay, so if you take the Salesforce app or the My Salesforce app, turn around, you can expose Lightning through there. I believe that there's even more enhancements to that coming, but we can talk about that, after they've come out and we've had we've padded the future-looking statements, the forward-looking statement slide. But yeah, that's another great question.
Kevin, we noticed that you were able to attach pictures and audio. Can you attach videos as well?
Yeah, so you can attach videos. There's no real reason I didn't set it up to do videos other than time it takes to upload. As you might imagine, videos can be a little bit bigger than photos, and so I wanted to make the demo nice and quick. You do have to worry or keep in mind the constraints on terms of max file sizes for attachments and whether or not it's feasible for somebody to be uploading those on, say, cellular modem.
Great. And in terms of, case creation on mobile via the app, someone noticed that the mobile was in airplane mode. Can you search location in airplane mode? What's the reason for that?
Yeah, so I'm actually using my own personal iPhone to do this demo, and I really didn't want phone calls interrupting the demo. So I put it in airplane mode. What I also did is I also turned on the Wi-Fi. So I have Wi-Fi access. I have information there, and it seems to be pulling my accurate location when I pulled the map up. So I believe GPS is working as well. The way GPS works, it doesn't really need to transmit to grab the thing. It's listening to grab that information as to where you're at. So I have no reason to doubt that it is pulling my accurate address.
Great. Can we integrate Salesforce pages with Lightning components into a native app when using the SDK route?
Yeah, again, that goes back to doing Lightning out and surfacing a web view in order to show that information, and that's sort of advanced usage of the SDK and how that would work. I don't think we've got the time to dive into that because it's a webinar unto itself. But in theory, it's possible. I've never actually done it myself, but I don't see any reason why it couldn't.
Kevin, how many records can I view in offline mode?
That's a good question. I'm gonna have to get back to you on that one. I don't have an accurate answer for that one. Offline mode is one of those nice features that I've never actually gotten to play with much beyond making it work with the 1 or 2 records to make sure I know how it works. So that's a great question. Hit me up on Twitter at CodeFryer, and I will get you a solid answer and get back to you that way.
Great. And then if folks have questions for Kevin that were not answered during our Q&A, you can hit him up on CodeFryer, or you can go to our developer forums and ask the question there. All right, another question. Can 2 apps on the same device exchange share information locally in a secure way without having round trips to the server side in both apps?
So you have 2 apps that want to share information.
Locally.
Yeah, locally on the device. I'd have to give that some thought and experiment with it a bit. I don't know off the top of my head. I think for practical sake, it would just be easier to grab that data via a round trip to the server.
For on-device final configuration of the app, is there a way to use device management or MDM to push specific preferences for each end user as they deploy the app, such as groups, certificates, app-specific preferences? And does the SDK offer support to make this?
Yeah, so MDM is another whole topic unto itself. The SDK, I believe, supports the ability for MDM to define the login URL, but that's the only property I know of off the top of my head that I've run across. That's not to say that it's not more configurable with MDM, just that I haven't played with it or seen it played with. As you might imagine, deploying MDM for my own personal phone to do tests with is kind of cumbersome. So I haven't really tested that much, but I do know that you can adjust the login URL via MDM. We've got a whole document on the doc site about developing with the SDK, and you'll find more about MDM and setting the login URL there. We'll get that URL out as well.
How does sync happen from offline to Salesforce? Is there a certain time frame, or does it need to happen within a certain duration?
Yeah, so let me make sure I understand the question. You're wondering if you've got a record viewed in offline mode and then you change something, how long does it have before it updates that record, or will it time out before updating if it it doesn't have connection for longer than a set period of time? If that's the case, I don't know of any set period of time where it will say, okay, I'm going to give up, but it will try to sync the next time there is connectivity and the app is opened.
Great. It looks like you're using a scratchorg on the Salesforce side. Can you speak to any complexity with hooking up your Swift mobile SDK for iOS code to a fresh scratchorg config file, perhaps?
So the code for trail insurance, the demo app, is available on GitHub. We'll get that URL out with the video, but there is a whole set of instructions on setting that up. The good news is, in terms of just setting up the org and connecting it, it's really simple. For using the community's users, there's a whole bunch of manual steps right now that are required, and those involve things like actually setting up the community, creating a user for the community, etc. The Scratch org just makes it easy to spin up the org with communities enabled, with networks enabled, and for us to do things like create permission sets, etc. Makes the development process a lot easier. There's nothing in particular about using a Scratch org that makes it hard to connect a Scratch org to your mobile app, because the connection between the mobile app and your Scratch org is done through, or to any org, is done through that OAuth connected app. So you create the connected app, probably in your production instance, and then you'll be able to use that to connect to any Salesforce org, so long as that app is still active, that connected app is still active. And because of that, you can use those OAuth, you can use that OAuth consumer key to go in there and connect your mobile app to a Scratch org or a sandbox or production, etc., without changing anything. You just have to leave that one connection key in there.
Is this translation Workbench aware? Can you use custom labels?
I
think that was from the beginning.
So the SDK, so the SDK is based on the REST APIs. So anytime you can make a request and get a custom label returned in the REST API. Yes, most of the time those labels are probably going to apply through the UI, through things like Lightning components, etc. I'm not entirely sure I understand the question though. If you want to do translation of the UI elements within your custom app, Xcode and iOS have that ability built in. That's kind of outside the scope of the webinar, but there are great tutorials on how to do I18N for various languages in Xcode and iOS.
How much data can we store in sync mode?
That's a great question. I don't know that I have a solid answer for that, again, because I've never tried to sync much more than a few records. Let me look up that answer and get back to you. If you'll reach out to me on Twitter at CodeFryer, I can get you a solid answer.
Can you also log in using face recognition or fingerprint?
You can't log in using face recognition, but the PIN protection can use Face ID or Touch ID. So the difference here being is you have to authenticate to your org at least once using your username and password. And once you've done that, if PIN protection is enabled, you have to add that additional layer of security of either a PIN number or your Face ID or Touch ID.
Will there be a GitHub link to the project source in the future? I'd love to try it out for myself.
Yeah, there is. The source is available on GitHub under Trailhead Apps, Trail Insurance. We'll put that link in with the notification that goes out with the link to the video so that you can just click on the link, but it is there. You'll be able to click on it. There are, again, some instructions you'll have to follow on setting up your Scratch org to meet the requirements for the app, but you should be good to go with it.
And I think we have time for one more question before we continue. And this actually might be a good segue into our CTA slide. Where can I find basics to start with mobile application? And how will this app be dependent on the version upgrade of iOS?
Okay, so I got two questions there I hear. One question is, how can I learn more? And that goes back to our, we want you to go to Trailhead and try out that trail, build iOS SDK applications with Salesforce Trail. You can find that on trailhead.salesforce.com. And that's going to cover your essentials. It's going to cover what is Swift, how do I use Swift, what is the syntax of Swift, and it's going to cover how do you use Xcode. Xcode is the integrated development environment you use to write iOS applications. So it's going to cover you on the language you need to use to write and the tool you use to write it in. It's also going to cover basics about the SDK. So what can the SDK do? How can we how can I do X, Y, or Z? And finally, it's also going to cover native iOS elements. So you're going to walk through the module that will walk you through doing very similar things to what we did with trail insurance. Not the same thing, but very similar, making a REST request to get data, saving or creating data, etc.
And Kevin, can you just pull up that slide so folks on the line can see how to get access to that trail?
Yeah, there we go. That https://s-force.co/2ccpvn1 is the link that'll take you directly to that trail.
Great.
Now, the other question I heard in that one was how will upgrading the iOS upgrades affect the application? That's a complicated question. In my experience, I've never run across a situation where things truly broke. Usually with an iOS upgrade, you get new features, new things, and you may have to code those new features into your app. But I've never run across a situation where I had a negative experience upgrading with any app built with the SDK. That's not to say there might not be one, just my experience is that there hasn't been one.
Thank you, Kevin. And again, if we did not get to your specific question, please reach out to us in the forum at developers.salesforce.com/forum, or as Kevin mentioned, you can reach out to him on Twitter at CodeFryer. Again, thank you so much for joining us today. Just a reminder to share your feedback with us so that we can make this webinar even better. We will have a survey at the end, so stay tuned for that. And this concludes today's webinar. Thank you everyone for joining us today. Thank you, Kevin, and we hope to see you at our webinars in the future. Enjoy the rest of your day.